What compels a person known to the world as the beloved voice of Frosty the Snowman to craft an entire life based on deception, marrying and having children, and then simply abandoning them only to repeat the cycle again and again? Is it simply a matter of selfishness, or is there a deeper, more profound psychological detachment at play? We're going to explore the unsettling pattern of one man's life, the voice of Frosty the Snowman, Jackie Vernon, whose public persona of cheer and humor masked a private existence marked by a serial abandonment and hidden families. The psychological indicators of his behavior are stark, and they provide a rare glimpse into the mind of someone who viewed personal relationships as disposable. Welcome. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and this is my mental health analysis of the Jackie Vernon case. I will be focusing on the main mental health and psychological indicators while providing the backstory. I don't just talk about the crimes, I talk about the psychology behind the crimes and the mysteries that captivate us. I look beyond the facts of the case to understand the why of the crime. My analysis is based on my speculations. It's not a diagnosis of anyone involved in this case. Although technically Jackie's actions were not a legal crime, they were most certainly a psychological crime against his family. The most compelling psychological indicator, one that immediately commands our attention, is the documented pattern of serial familiar abandonment. Jackie Vernon, born Ralph Vernon in 1925, he was known to the world as the voice of Frosty the Snowman and a successful stand-up comedian. But the facts, as revealed by his son David Vernon, paint a picture of a man with multiple concealed families. The first psychological indicator in this case is the persona versus the private self and narcissism. When we look at the life of Jackie Vernon, we see a profound split between his public persona, the funny, beloved voice of a Christmas classic, and his private self, a man capable of immense repeated psychological cruelty through abandonment. This chasm is a powerful indicator of narcissistic personality disorder traits. While I cannot diagnose him, the behavioral patterns align with the extreme need for admiration, a lack of empathy, and an exploitive nature often associated with his profile. According to his son David, the family discovered the secret history when a woman and a teenage boy arrived unexpectedly at their home. This shocking moment unveiled that Jackie Vernon had been married at least 3 times before his marriage to David's mother Hazel, and had fathered children in those previous families. He had simply walked away from these prior families as he pursued his career and new relationships. This isn't just a simple case of infidelity or divorce. This is a systematic pattern of leaving behind the deep, lifelong responsibility of a spouse and children. He even allegedly named the sons of his previous marriages Ralph, his own birth name, before abandoning them. The fact that he seemingly felt entitled to erase these entire histories, creating a new, separate life without accounting for the emotional wreckage left behind. It speaks volumes about the lack of moral and emotional accountability. It suggests a deeply ingrained sense of entitlement and a power defense mechanism of denial that allowed him to compartmentalize these lives. The sheer effort required to maintain such an extensive network of lies over decades indicates a life dedicated to emotional avoidance. What deep-seated fear or psychological need was he attempting to satisfy by continually starting over and over and over again? The second psychological indicator here is the repetitive compulsion and emotional avoidance. The repeated pattern of starting a new family, only to abandon it and start another, can be analyzed as a repetitive compulsion. In psychological terms, this is often an unconscious attempt to reenact the painful childhood event or trauma, hoping for a different, successful outcome. But in Vernon's case, the reenactment led to the same result: desertion. Jackie Vernon's comedy career, which began in the 1950s, was on the rise during the years of these deceptions. They were taking place. Nobody knew about it. His work provided a perfect psychological cover. Comedians, especially those of his era, often maintain a distance from their audience, cloaked in their performing identity. His professional life demanded travel and time away, which would have offered an ideal, socially acceptable excuse for his emotional and physical absence from his families. For someone with attachment issues, the career choice may have been unconsciously driven by the opportunity to avoid sustained deep emotional connection. He could cycle through relationships, always knowing he had a career as an escape route, a way to maintain emotional distance and control. The ultimate act of control is to simply disappear, severing all emotional and legal ties. This pattern is not typically seen in individuals with a healthy capacity for grief, guilt, or attachment. It suggests a deficit in the ability to experience empathy, the cornerstone of adult relationships. The psychological indicator number 3 is the substance use and mental health coping mechanisms. David Vernon also reported that his father struggled with addiction, specifically with Quaaludes, and experienced periods of depression. This opens a critical window into his internal world. Substance use disorder is frequently a form of self-medication, an attempt to numb or suppress overwhelming internal pain, anxiety, or emotional dysregulation. While the public saw the humorist, the private reality suggests a man struggling with significant internal distress. It is highly probable that the stress of maintaining multiple lives, compounded by the emotional toll of his serial abandonment, contributed to his depression and his reliance on substances. The lack of genuine connection and a constant state of deception are psychologically exhausting, creating a perpetual state of internal conflict. This self-medication would have further impaired his judgment and his capacity for empathy, creating a vicious cycle. The pain led to substance abuse, the abuse intensified the detachment, and the detachment fueled the abandonment. The fourth psychological indicator here is identity fragmentation and the need for recreation. Psychologically, the act of starting a new family under a new set of circumstances can be viewed as an attempt at identity recreation. Jackie Vernon, or Ralph Vernon, wasn't just abandoning his family. He was abandoning a version of himself he no longer wanted to be, only to discover that the fundamental internal issues followed him wherever he went. The detail that he named his sons from prior marriages Ralph is a fascinating psychological clue. It suggests a narcissistic need to leave a piece of his original authentic self, his birth name, with the families he discarded, perhaps as a twisted form of legacy, or to subtly mark them as his own possessions, even as he walked away. He seemingly couldn't fully integrate the reality of his actions, preferring to create entirely new social identities. The beloved celebrity, the devoted husband, the father, each one a fragile construct built on sand. The constant need to perform, both on stage and in life, for multiple partners, in multiple families, speaks to a deep, perhaps unconscious fear of being truly known. To be truly known is to be vulnerable, and for someone with his apparent psychological profile, vulnerability would be perceived as a profound threat. The psychological indicator 5 is the impact of parental abandonment or childhood trauma. While specific details about Jackie Vernon's childhood are not widely publicized, his adult pattern of serial abandonment strongly suggests an underlying trauma related to attachment. From a mental health perspective, patterns of abandonment in adulthood, particularly those involving family and children, are frequently rooted in childhood experiences of neglect, emotional unavailability, or literal abandonment by a primary caregiver. The individual, never having formed a secure attachment style, either replicates the trauma by abandoning others or clings desperately to the unstable relationships. Vernon's pattern is one of replication. His apparent inability to sustain long-term commitment could be an unconscious defensive strategy to ensure he is the one who leaves first, preventing the inevitable pain of being left. The psychological relief of being the leaver would temporarily outweigh the guilt, thus reinforcing the behavior. The abandonment of his previous families became an unconscious mechanism to regulate his own emotional distress. By cutting off the source of potential pain, the intimacy of his stability of a relationship, he protected this deeply fragile sense of self-worth. The psychological indicator 6 here is deception as a core behavioral trait. Deception, not just in relationship status, but in daily life, appears to be a core feature of his behavior. The public record indicates a calculated effort to conceal significant aspects of his personal history from those closest to him. Imagine the cognitive load, the constant need to remember who knows what, the avoidance of places and people that might connect his desperate world, the meticulous crafting of different narratives for different audiences. This high level of consciousness, deliberate dishonesty, is an indicator of a personality that privileges self-preservation and personal gain over truth and the emotional welfare of others. It's an act of deep psychological manipulation, where the deception itself becomes entrenched lifestyle, a habit that is almost impossible to break. For many people, the stress of a single lie is immense. For Vernon, the lies were the very foundation of his personal life. This suggests that he may have reached a point where the performance of truth was more comfortable than the truth itself. The line between the comedian's act and his real life likely blurred into non-existence. The 7th psychological indicator here is the final act in self-destruction. Jackie Vernon passed away at the age of 63. His documented struggles with addiction and depression speak to an internal self-destructive trajectory that often accompanies the psychological profile of chronic and emotional isolation. The psychological weight of a lifetime spent running from emotional intimacy and responsibility must be immense. The depression he experienced was likely a direct consequence of his emotional suppression. While he succeeded professionally, his personal life was a landscape of broken bonds and hidden pain. People who live with profound internal conflict and deceit often face a crisis point where their internal world can no longer be managed. For Vernon, the addiction and depression served as a tragic, visible manifestation of this physical breakdown. The enduring legacy of the case is not just the discovery of the secret families, but the realization that his professional success came at a devastating psychological cost to himself, and more importantly, to his abandoned children and wives. The 8th and last psychological indicator here is a victimology and intergenerational trauma. The final critical psychological angle is the impact on the victims, his children, his wives. The act of abandonment creates a deep, lasting psychological wound known as intergenerational trauma. The son, David Vernon, who made the shocking discovery, was forced to confront the reality that his father's life was a lie. This kind of revelation can shatter a person's core sense of reality and self-worth. It forces the child to question not only their parent, but the entirety of their childhood memories. For the children who were abandoned, the trauma of being an erased secret can lead to severe abandonment issues, difficulties forming secure attachments in their own lives, and a lifelong search for the missing piece of their identity. The clues of this case, the multiple names, the unexpected visitors, the self-destructive behaviors, all come full circle to highlight a single devastating psychological truth: that a man who brought joy and laughter to millions in the public eye was incapable of experiencing or offering genuine, sustainable love in his private life. The ultimate aha moment is a realization that the charming, funny persona wasn't just a career choice. It was a deeply ingrained pathological coping mechanism that allowed him to keep the world and his families at arm's length. This case serves as a powerful reminder that psychological pathology often hides in plain sight. It is the invisible wound of emotional neglect that leaves the most lasting scars. This was hard to learn about. I can't believe It just goes to show you that you have no idea what goes on in the personal lives of public figures. I have so many childhood memories of watching Frosty the Snowman. It's one of my favorite shows. I looked forward to it every single Christmas season. It's a beloved classic in Christmas tradition. Now it feels tainted by the real person behind the voice. It's so devastating to think about all the children and the wives, the families, and the extended families, how this truth and realization must have been such a traumatic experience and probably still is. Can you even imagine what it must have been like for his families to find out in this way? This creates so many psychological layers for every person involved. It completely tangles up the family dynamics and will likely require a lot of therapy and processing, I would imagine. So what did you think about this case? Were there any elements that stood out to you? If you want more mental health analysis of true crime cases or mysteries or profound abandonment issues like this one, be sure to subscribe for more. And if you found this case compelling, be sure to watch this next story. It will make you more aware of your surroundings. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe.